Thank you, AJ. Really appreciate that. I think AJ does a great job. I remember when I first got the job and we started to lead the Delaware Cybersecurity Advisory Council, he called me up and made reference to the fact of when an event happens, nobody appreciates kind of the cyber, or how the cyber event could happen and how that down trickles to his agency and the responses that they have to put in place to take over. So, there is a symbiotic relationship for sure around cyber events as well as the outcomes across our nation and how it impacts our citizens. Solomon, thank you for introducing me, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Secure Delaware 2022. I've been attending this conference for many years. Venues have changed over that time as they have today. I was just noticing that we're a little over 200 people, so there must be a few more out there because we're expecting 350 today with more on the waiting list. So either our vendors are really good at holding people up or the rain is slowing people down, but we want to get them in here because we have a great speaker coming up as well. I want to take a moment to thank Solomon, Sandy, Lori, Heather, Claudette, some of the folks you've met as you've came in, everyone who helped put this event on. As I said, I've been doing this for a few years, seen quite a bit extended. I was really impressed by the attendee list this year, though. Really the diversity that existed, and I just wanted to run off as I looked through it last night. We have representation from K-12 and higher education, banking, chemical, pharma, healthcare, home builders, law enforcement, state, city, and local government, shipyards, aviation, insurance, churches, the National Guard, and many more. That's an impressive list of industry partners that are affected, and I think it really underscores kind of the importance and relevance, the demand, and acknowledgement that security is a part of everyday business in what we do and how we perform. It's something that every one of us has something to protect at this point, and so those investments have to be made. And how do we make those investments? A lot of times we rely on our vendors. So Solomon touched on it. I'm sure he will touch on it much further as we go along. But we have some really great local vendors, and we have some vendors from afar, as Solomon highlighted, that are premier vendors in their industry. And so we want to make sure that you get time to visit with them because this particular event wouldn't be possible without them. In addition, we couldn't do our jobs without them. So why do we need all this? Because bad actors are working 24/7, right? Between deceiving people into providing sensitive information, gaining access to our data and systems, it runs the gamut. And according to Cybersecurity Ventures, cybercrime generates a profit of over $6 trillion and is expected to grow to $10.5 trillion by 2025. $1 trillion, right? There's no question this has been an eventful year in cybersecurity front. We've had everything from major breaches and new vulnerabilities, but the reality is those are kind of commonplace at this point. We've gotten used to those. We've seen an even greater focus here recently on protecting critical infrastructure and dealing with third-party supply chain compromises. So to be prepared for all this, we've seen really a large focus from our federal partners at CISA. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to check out their Shields Up initiative. It's a site that is filled with a significant amount of information, provides you access to representatives across industries that can work with you. The tools and services offered there, I think, further highlight the importance of events like this one here at Secure Delaware. It's the work that we do, that you do, that we all do, that needs to be focused on and built into the plans that we have as we move business forward. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, as was mentioned. Usually we host this event towards the tail end of the month. But what we're asking all of you, since we got a good participation this year, is to help us get the word out. So we're hosting it in the beginning of the month, letting you know about all the events that we have scheduled for the month and that are taking place, and help us spread the word. Every day we have new users, from senior citizens to children and those gaining access for the first time as broadband and other services are extended across our state. We need to educate them about how they engage online and how they behave online. And to do our part, we've curated some presentations and some citizen cyber awareness informational tables throughout the state that will be taking place during the month of October. There are 3 specific topics that we're going to focus on for those events. Safeguarding your identity online. So that's stealing identities and other data has become big business, as we just heard. Learn ways to safeguard your identity while still using the internet. Securing your devices is the second one. Our devices can become a threat to us when we're not safely securing the data that's housed on them. And then the third is detecting current scams. It's important to gain the skills to differentiate legitimate activities from scams that seem to be real. My parents are in their mid-70s. I still get phone calls at least a few times a month about a text or some email they received where they want to check in with me first, right, on why their financial institution that they don't do business with is asking them for information. So I think I've got them pretty close to the point where they will actually call their institution first before calling me to check on them, but we're still working through it. I think the key is that we don't want people to become victims, and there is an opportunity to be better prepared for that. You heard AJ talk about their role. As much as they perform in the reaction space and responding to these events, being prepared for them, making it second nature on how you deal with these particular situations is really what's going to help us in the long run. For our students in 4th and 5th grades, they're going to be receiving iSafe. That's a special curriculum geared towards online safety. And new this year, we have an online program for our high school students that will help them along the way as well. Solomon will provide some more details about that and various things along the way. But I think what's important in all that we're doing is getting out early, sharing the message, informing, educating those as they begin this process of starting to use technology. I can't help but be on this campus. I'm an alumni. I was almost 25 years ago. This particular Pencader campus is completely different. It used to look like a series of Motel 6 buildings. And to think of what it looks like now is just amazing and where it's gone. So if you haven't taken advantage of it yet, all of this information can be found on our digiknow.delaware.gov website. I encourage you to go there. I'm not just saying it's a great site. The team has put together a really good site, and our partners at MSISAC believe it as well. They picked us as the overall best of the web among the states in 2021. So great feat by the team. They're back on top. They had held this reign at one point, but think about it, across all the states in the nation, little old Delaware at the top of the list for providing the appropriate information and getting the pieces out there. So before I introduce our first speaker, I want to remind everyone that if you're not fully back in the context of, here we are all in person, we're not doing that hybrid event like we had done in the past. We do have a phone number that you can text your questions to for our speaker as we go along. There it is, 302-428-9525. We do have mics that will be in the audience, so if you want to go old school and just stand up, we will pass the mic along to you as well. So with that, let me introduce our speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the day, Dr. James Fraley. You guys may recognize me. He's joined us in the past. Always brings us a great presentation. Dr. Fraley is an assistant professor, chair for information assurance in the College of Technology at Wilmington University. Dr. Fraley has over 30 years of experience working as an educator and security practitioner. He has taught at the Wilmington University for over 6 years, and he's held positions as a senior threat intelligence strategist, as well as in global security solutions supporting Fortune 100 companies. His commercial experience has been with the likes of McAfee, Northrop Grumman, L3 Communications, and DuPont. He has managed and supported some of the largest and most complex cybersecurity projects for both the private and public sectors, including the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, Federal Aviation Administration, and the City of New York. Dr. Fraley's research focused on advanced detection techniques using machine learning and polymorphic and metamorphic malware. But today, he's going to focus on implementing zero trust. And he's also a retired U.S. Army signal officer with over 22 years of experience. Let's all welcome Dr. Fraley to Secure Delaware.
Hey, good morning. How's everybody doing on a rainy Tuesday morning? Huh? Everybody good? All right. Well, if you're expecting a boring technical presentation, you're in the wrong place. Okay. So I'm going to start off with, a man walks into a bar. He sees the Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and a guy who's implemented zero trust. Which of those are real? Santa Claus, you have a shot. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about zero trust. And I come from industry. I teach and passionate about cybersecurity at Wilmington University. Still have ties to industry. And what I thought I'd do today is talk about zero trust, because this is a paradigm shift for our industry and for our cybersecurity community as a whole. And there are, having been a consultant to some of the largest firms, I can tell you we're not ready, right? And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here on a Tuesday morning, but what I'm saying to you is, like, there are a lot of things we've got to do to get ready for zero trust. So I'm going to take you through that. So if you walk away here with three things, right? What is zero trust? What do I have to do to implement it? And what are some of those gotchas, right, that you can do? So we're going to talk about a little bit of overview, architecture, some of the benefits, an implementation approach, which is how I got on this stage, and we'll talk about some use cases and challenges, okay? All right. So when we talk about zero trust, one of the things is that it is a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift because in the old days, right, and I like to talk to I have twin boys who are 22. And when I say the old days, they think about 5 years ago. When I start thinking about it, right, I'm talking about when we start implementing cybersecurity and security in networks and boundary perimeter detection and those kinds of things. We were just worried about, making sure that perimeter was well secured. We could do detection at that perimeter, and then anyone that we let in who was authorized could then jump around the network. That's what's changed, and what has really changed that, a couple of things in my mind. One of the things that has changed is that today we are in a bifurcated, if you will, architecture. Many of us have gone to cloud, right? And we have our on-prem systems. And so we are letting people jump between those two, right? And so the old castle kind of approach in terms of perimeter detection does not work, right? Because our perimeter is expanded, right? And with the cloud, it really takes us to a new dimension. So this perimeter detection, one of the things that I'd love to talk about is, especially when we talk about zero trust. Zero trust has been around a long time. It just hasn't been implemented. We'll talk about it, and you'll see it in a minute. So what are some of the myths, right? And so a couple of things that I want to leave you with today, right? It is, they are not just, protecting the networks. What we want to do is really protect kind of the not only the traffic, but also access to data, systems, applications. So we have more granularity in terms of security, right? They're not easy to implement, so that's one of the things that I want to leave you with today. And the reason I say that we're not ready for it is because, no one has to confess, because I know this to be a fact. It's like, how, can you tell me today how many of your users need access to that HR database or, that payroll database? And to what level do they need those accesses to those kinds of applications, right? We don't know. So when we think about zero trust, it's a different paradigm in that we are re-authenticating almost every request. And if we do it right, we can actually go down to not only the network application data, but we can actually do it the microprocess rate if we do it right. However, there's a lot of work to get to that, right? So we have to really know about our systems. So just a couple other things, right? There's a lot of, I would say, buzzwords going around, and so people get confused about, is it zero trust? Is it data loss protection? What is it? So let's so I'm going to help you kind of figure that out. So from a zero trust
perspective, what we're trying to do is implement an architecture now that is not perimeter-based, but we know all these pillars. The user, device, network, the application data, and then we get some great benefits from that in terms of visibility and analytics. And speaking to a machine learning guy, this is what I'm talking about. I am so excited to get some of that user behavioral data, then I can make some big decisions. And then with that data, I can actually then move to an automation and orchestration. So I can either approve it or deny it, and I can do that based on your past history and based on some real good. So we can take this, right, and we don't have to rely on the perimeter-based detection. We can do it in flight and as the requests are ongoing. And so these are the kind of things that we can do in terms of a finely grained dynamic analytic, and take a look at that control. For those of you, I sit on several working groups, and and I will tell you that they take up a lot of time, right? And I tell my boss all the time, they're worthwhile. But one of the things that you find out is that you really get an appreciation for how these security standards come into play and how many people get involved and how those pieces fall together. So such is the case with the 800-207, which is the zero trust environment. Go take a look at it if you want some light reading at the end of the day. It'll really put you in a good place to get a good snooze. But I will say to you, it does talk about kind of a couple of big things. It does talk about zero trust architecture, talk about some key concepts, and then also this concept of zero trust network access. So when I talk to students or I talk to my colleagues, it's always important to understand, like, am I talking about zero trust architecture, or am I talking about zero trust network access? What are we? Let's make sure we have those right terms right. So what's the goal, right? If you haven't really been around this environment, what's the goal of zero trust, right? It's to be proactive and unified, right? And so we have a common policy across all of our operations, right? And I can use all kinds of different data points to approve and deny access or to the next thing. I approve or deny access to application data and so forth. So what I can do, right, is that I can validate every request. I can have a unified policy. How many times, for those of us who've been in an operational construct, right, putting together firewall rules, either in Snort or some other thing, where I'm going to do denial or approval of, basic, firewall rules and those kind of things. I can do that in one place. I don't have to do that in, a number of different places. So that's what the promise is, and so we have this unified policy. And then what we can do on every request is calculate that trustworthiness, right? And we can create, based upon the history and the ongoing, we can use that data to make some decisions. And then, this is really one of the things that I talk about a lot about, and I've been working a lot with attack surface management. And is this, how do I limit that attack surface, right? And by being more finely grained, I can really kind of make that happen. So how does all this stuff work, right? So for those of you who are not so deep in the weeds on this, let me just kind of give you some highlights, right? So there's a couple of different engines that are important to zero trust, okay? One of those is the policy enforcement point, and so what we call the PEP. And the PEP really acts as a gateway and has a lot of data and can make some high-level, very quick decisions. The PEP communicates to what we call the policy administrator. The policy administrator is kind of the centralized policy holder for the entire network. And this is where we can talk to networks, application data, all of those kinds of things, if you have it, right? And then, as you can see here, just in the core zero phase, right, these are the logical places. So I can have a data access policy, I can use PKI, two-factor authentication, I can use identity management, and then I can also use my SIM to better inform my policy, okay? So that all these things help us kind of get to that point. But here's the brains of the thing, right? The policy engine allows me to take all this data, make a decision about it, and should, Jim Fraley be accessing the HR data? Should Jim Fraley really be accessing these kinds of things? And I can not only, like in the old days, right, not only deny it, but I can capture when the request was made, what were they asking for, and either go back and fix policy or try to figure out, why that request was being made. So these are the kinds of things that help me, and this policy engine really does a fantastic job of doing validation and decision-making on the fly. And this allows me to talk about multiple platforms. So during the pandemic, what was the one target of the cyber attackers during pandemic? Anybody have an idea? Hospitals and IoT devices. Why? Yeah, they're non-protected, right? So now, with with zero trust, I can start to protect some of those in a much better way. So, I come from the world of machine learning, so I just wanted to mention to you that, the way we can think about this, right, is that policy engine that I talked about, the brains of that is based on this graphing theory that says, hey, a lot of these requests were already approved, should be approved, and these outliers, I can say, wait a second, this is not probably something I should allow. I can use some of this graphing theory to kind of approve or deny things very, very quickly and use advanced algorithms to kind of help us drive better decisions, okay? So, we talked about implementation. The challenges in where Zero Trust has a hard time is in this first bullet. Do you know your architecture? Do you know your user devices, services, and data? Do you know all those things to implement that, right? I can't tell you how many times I called on a client. I spent 10 years at McAfee. I covered all industry segments, okay? I could walk in and say, could you give me your latest network diagram? 2 days later, this is the best we got, right? And that's the challenge, right? Is we know it, but we don't document it. We don't have the artifacts to kind of prove it. And when I try to go dive deeper, right? What's the network segments? What's the data? All of those kind of things. That's where we run into some. So I would tell you the implementation, from Zero Trust is making sure you understand those and understanding the risk associated with those systems, right? The second thing is, right, is know your users, services, and device entities. This is especially challenging in the ICS or SCADA environment. What are those devices? What are they doing? And then, as you think about it, you have a PCL, or you have some device doing a special task. Do we know what that task is, and do we know what network segment it's on? How do we prove those, and what talks to it? So those are some of the things that we can talk about. The other thing is that I can tell you that probably 10% of the organizations I supported during my 10 years at McAfee understood user behavior. Did they capture user behavior? Did they understand what that behavior was, what devices and what services, were delivered as part of that? Next is, can we use policy to authorize requests? And do we have enough information around that so that I could put in to an enterprise policy, everything you need, Jim Fraley, what kinds of things. So, I can get to my travel, I can get to my client information, I can get to the internal documents that support my job. Those are the kind of things we need to know, okay? But again, it goes back to this understanding these users, devices, network, applications, and data. And then, how do I authenticate and authorize everywhere? So, I can tell you right now that I had a number of customers who, allowed bring your own device at home. We had the issue during COVID, right? Where we were using, non-authorized laptops, home computers to get to applications via web, VPN, whatever. Right? So how do I authenticate and authorize everywhere? Then we had a problem. Once we had that problem solved during the pandemic, right, we had another problem with data walking different places that we didn't want it to walk, right? And I can tell you that my wife works for Corteva, and she has to print things. And every time she has to print something, it is blocked because of data loss prevention policy. It's like, I can't do my job, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things, understanding those users, right? And then, how are you monitoring those users and devices, right? So how do we enable that, and how do we securely do that? I mean, just in terms of trying to do that, in terms of trying to support, basic business operations. Here's something that will change kind of how you think about security as well, is that in zero trust you have to grant access every time, all requests, right? And so this is a hard concept, and I will tell you that a lot of my network brethren would Jim, you're crazy, but don't trust any network and don't trust any user, including your on-prem stuff. So this is the kinds of things. I will say to you that we see a lot of attacks, and I mentioned to you that I work on a couple of working groups. One is the cyber crimes working group with the FBI. One of the things is that once a user can get into your network and move laterally within your network, the only way you're going to stop them, right, is to validate each of those requests, right, and deny those soon. And then what we also have to get to is really get to a place where we can choose services. How are we going to deliver these services that embrace kind of the zero trust mentality, right? So I can not only give you kind of a package that tells me, again, what the network is, what the application is, what the system is, and what the data needs are, and I can give that to you in full package. You can give it back to me as an authorized request, but getting there is going to take some time. I talked about user and entity behavior analytics, UBA. So these are the kinds of things that you get as you move to kind of a zero trust mentality, right? Is that being able to understand what that user and entity behavior looks like, and then how does it really inform, if you will, your security operations center, right? And you can you get a lot of benefits from that. You get continuous monitoring, real-time visibility, you get these behavioral analytics, and then you can do this continuous risk scoring. So you can rate users and networks and applications based on risk. The other thing I would tell you is that it would get you, in a better position to do proactive data loss. You get faster detection and incident response as a result as well, because what you're going to find is if I continue to get hammered in a particular network on a particular system, something's going on, so you got to go investigate. Reduced overhead costs in terms of IT operations. You're not having, if you can't, in a perfect world, going back to my analogy, right, Santa Claus, but if I can get to a policy, an enterprise policy, I can really reduce the number of those things that I have to manage across, firewalls and, access controls and things like that. and then it helps me really be positioned in a better place for regulatory and compliance. You'll start to see some more regulatory requirements for Zero Trust. And there are a number of, I talked about COVID-19, being, most of the people that I work with today work in a hybrid environment where I'm half time in the office, half time at home. So now I have this hybrid, as well as cloud. I have a much stronger partner network, this data loss prevention, and I can now start to get some visibility to advanced threat. So it helps me a lot. So what are some of the challenges? That I have covered a number of them, but what I want to leave you with today is, you kind of have to come up with kind of an overall approach to Zero Trust, right? For Zero Trust architecture. It requires kind of a commitment, but it is going to take some time and consume some calories in the beginning, but the payoff is down the road. And the Zero Trust versus productivity is kind of a trade-off, and also the cost, right? There's a number of different ways to implement Zero Trust, and where do you start? So these are the kinds of things that go. So in summary, I believe Zero Trust will take us to that next step, right? The next step of where we need to be in terms of providing better detection, better security. Should provide some simplification of IT management. It does, by constantly verifying and validating user requests, I can make sure that those things don't get past me that shouldn't. And then, should change my architecture, both in terms of selection of systems and networks and those kind of things, to get in a better place. And so NIST has done a good job on this particular. So with that, I'll answer any questions. Hopefully you found that, number one, I answered the question, what is Zero Trust? What are those implementation issues you have? And ultimately, what kinds of things do I have to do in my organization to kind of go on that journey, okay? All right, I'll answer any questions.
So Dr. Fraley, where are you seeing the success opportunities?
The success opportunities, I think, are coming in small, bite-sized chunks, right? Like implementing, where, for instance, like in the financial services area, where I'm first of all doing Zero Trust on some of my branches, right? So I can see that, right? So that bite-sized, very well understood, kind of pieces, okay? Okay, so single sign-on, right, is authentication, right? Whereas Zero Trust will take that authentication and validate that, but at a lower granularity, right? So I now have given you permission to access the network. Now, what systems and data should I be accessing? So that'll help us. Okay, yes, sir.
Good morning. What is the and it's a hard question to answer, but this seems like it's going to mean ripping everything out and replacing it with a whole new structure, or at least adding a whole lot of stuff. What's an estimated cost of a medium-sized company that would have to implement Zero Trust architecture?
Yeah, that is a hard one. Again, I think that I'll answer it this way. We're spending a lot of money on different pieces, right? So we're talking about Zero Trust, we're talking about IDSs, IPSs, and so how I would answer that question is like, what does my architecture look like, and where is my architecture going to look like in the future, and how do I, when I think about total cost of ownership, not only thinking about the devices and the software, but also the operational costs. And I would say to you, the problem that we have today is that we don't have enough people, right, to actually manage all that stuff and bring all that stuff together in a really well, finely tuned way. And so what we have are these pieces that are, maybe 80, 85% there, but but not, from a traditional kind of security architecture. Zero Trust will overlay that, right? And you can retire some of those things as you kind of on your plan, right? So I do think it will be it's not evolutionary, I mean, it's evolutionary, not revolutionary, but as you phase out some of those things, I think you can phase in some of the Zero Trust pieces to kind of help you. The biggest issue, again, going back to, do I understand my networks, data, and systems enough to do that policy so I can really kind of provide that access? Okay? Thank you all. Hope you all enjoyed it.